Hello and good afternoon to everyone. Welcome to the Intervision, the Added Value and Benefits for Management Consultants digital event hosted by the Institute of Consulting. My name is Michael and I am an Events Delivery Manager at CMI, and I'll shortly be handing over to Monique to begin today's event. If you have any questions at all, during this digital event, you can ask them using the live chat box on the right hand of your screen, and we'll seek to answer as many as we can during the Q&A. Today's session is being recorded and will be shared with you later today for those of you who have booked or registered to attend. So without any further delay, I'm going to hand over to Monique Bellersen, management consultant, who will begin today's event and presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for your kind words, Michael, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to be able to tell you about Intervision and how we, in the Netherlands, but also in other countries, benefit from Intervision. So this presentation has three parts. One is I'll introduce myself to you very shortly. Then I'll talk about Intervision, what it is, and what are the results of Intervision, how you can benefit from it as a management consultant. And well, these are the three parts. So let's start. A moment. Yeah. So a short introduction. I'm a certified management consultant in the Netherlands. I do a lot of work concerning Intervision, so you can find more information on the website, of course. I was in the Institute of Management Consultants. I was the former chair of the Intervision committee, and I wrote a book about it also in the English language, so that's far more easy than Dutch for you. And I developed a 75 helpful question game. In the field of Intervision, I train Intervision groups how to work with Intervision, how to do that. I develop and train Intervision methods. I come to that later, of course. And I train people to facilitate Intervision, and with that I mean how to guide an Intervision meeting. Where do we do it? Well, in a lot of business fields, as you can read. University and business schools work with it, consultancy firms, but also educational, legal, banking sectors and industry. Now at this point, I have a lot of Intervision groups with CEOs of different companies who come together to talk about issues at their work. Tomorrow I start group 50, so there's a lot of it's rather popular in Holland. And well, let's tell you about what it is. That's far more interesting. Before, I hope at the end of this afternoon you have a bit of an idea, a slight idea about how you can improve yourself as a management consultant professional and how it contributes to the quality of our profession. But also when you are more experienced in the Intervision field, you can use it with your clients and helping them to improve, as I do with my clients. What is Intervision? That's the part where we are now. Before we started, I asked Michael, do you know Intervision in the UK? I did some research in Europe and the USA about Intervision, and the only countries which use Intervision are those who you can read here. So if you recognize Intervision, or perhaps you use another name, or you say, hey, we do that too, I would be very pleased to hear that, because I couldn't find it. You see my email address below, but well, that's my question to you. This question, which you can read here, is a question this question I use a lot when I start to talk about Intervision, because it's a focus really on on Intervision, how it works and how you benefit from it. Because central in Intervision is asking questions. I come to that also, of course, later. And well, a question is one thing, but a question which has made an impact on your work, well, that's not often that you get a question like that. And so I'm asking you, what question have you heard recently? Perhaps during the presentation you can think of that and say, well, a question is a very strong, asking questions is a very strong way of thinking, and well, that's the center of Intervision. Let me explain it more to you. So, what is Intervision? Intervision is about development as a professional. A professional can be a management consultant, but can also be a lawyer, a scientist, a teacher, a doctor, and they come together in a group of 5 to 8 people, not more, only a small amount of people. And what they do is they talk about issues at work. And we call it a case. We talk about a case. And one of the participants has this case. He is the case provider. And people read often, well, I have to have a problem, but I don't have any problems today, so I don't have a case. So I prefer to use the term professional puzzle. So something which puzzles me, which comes, on which I don't have always the answers. Sorry, but it's not really a problem, but it keeps me busy thinking what to do. That is already a case. But if there's a real problem, that's a case as well, of course. And the goal of Intervision is 2 ways. First is to gain new insights, new thoughts, new ideas, new perspectives. And the second one is that you find alternative ways of acting, of behaving in this case. This Intervision meeting is guided by an experienced facilitator. He guides the discussion. It's not just a discussion, but a structured one. So we use an Intervision method. In the Dutch book, we have 27 methods, in the English version 10. So if you are interested, you have enough methods to start with. So we have a case provider, a facilitator, and the rest of the people are participants. And they are very important, but because what they do is they ask questions. Not just any question. Asking a question is not so difficult, but asking a helpful question is. A helpful question makes the case provider think. So by asking helpful questions, you help him to think about his case and finding more of his own answers. This Intervision group has 5 to 8 meetings per year. If you have 6 participants, then you meet 6 times a year, every 5, 6, sometimes 7 weeks. And each Intervision meeting takes 2 hours. Now I'm going to tell more details about Intervision. So the rules, I already told you about the case provider, the participants, and the facilitator. They have their own role. The case provider has the case, and he wants change. He wants things different, go differently. The participants, I already told you, but they ask questions, helpful questions, and they are not giving advices, tips, tricks, own experiences. They hold back their interpretations, and they are just focusing on asking questions to this case provider. The facilitator has also an important role because he prepares the case discussion. He knows the intervision method, because otherwise you can't have intervision. And one of the important tasks is to safeguard confidentiality and safety. So if it's not safe in a group, people won't open, and if it's not confidential, then then intervision is not possible. So he has to be sure that these confidentiality and safety are provided. So I told you about a case. What is a case? Well, you know what a case is, I suppose, but sometimes it's good to hear exactly what to do, what not to do. A case happened recently or will do soon. Sometimes you have a case which happened 4 years ago, and that's too long ago. In the meantime, you changed, the context changed. You can't try new behavior or actions. It's too far away. So it happened recently or will do soon. It's about work. Sometimes people say, well, my work is influenced by my problems with my partner. Well, that's not our profession. We are not psychologists, we are not relation therapists, so we just talk about work. And in this case, the case provider is an active player. So it has no use to have a case about the manager, the client, the management team, if you don't play an active role in this relationship or what a case is. So the case is always about the case provider. And I asked people in the group, as a facilitator, I asked them, please write down your case and end it with a case question. And a case question is by far the most important part, because with the question you tell the others what you want to learn, what you want to find out about your role, about yourself. So the case question starts with my question is, and for the facilitator that's also very important, because you help the participants to ask questions focused on this case question. I have some examples for you from my practice. And these are some examples. I won't read them all, but I picked one or two. My work is becoming more and more routine. People tell you in the preparation, they tell you about this case and why it's a routine and what is your work. And the case question is, how can I make it more challenging? Or what to do when a client makes wrong decisions from my point of view. Well, we all know these kinds of clients, but well, what to do? So it's about a relationship, about making wrong decisions, and what can I do? I have my own point of view, that also, and what can we do in this? What can I do in this situation? So that are some examples, and you can read the others if you find the presentation later on. I talked about intervision methods, and intervision methods is, well, I told you we translated 10 in English, and these are those methods. I won't talk about any method, all the methods now, because, but they are very different from each other, and you can, as a facilitator, you can choose a method which, in your view, suits the case the best or helps the case the best. I'll take one of the methods to tell something about, and that's method 6, the Code of Ethics. Well, we in the Netherlands, as you have, I assume, have a Code of Ethics as management consultants, and sometimes the case is interesting to see how it's, if you compare the case and the ethics which are in the case, when you compare it to the Code of Ethics from management consultancy in your country or in your organization, then you can see what is different and how do I relate to this code. Do I think I have to do things different, or is it okay for me? So you can compare it to ethical standards of the profession. And like clinics, method 4 is more about practicing. For example, you have a difficult relationship with your client, and you in a meeting you want to tell him or her something, then you can practice it. So you are yourself, and one of the participants is the client. And well, every method has its own challenge, so you can choose from those methods. But Intervision is always with a method. So we have a group, we have roles, we have the case, and we have a method. And here you can see what the process of Intervision is. There are 5 phases, and here you have the first 2, the phase 1 and the start. I leave it for now, but phase 1, no, let me tell you, all those 5 phases are in every method. You can find them. So phase 1 is that the case, and you come together. Then the first step is that the case provider starts telling about his case, his role in this situation, about his case question, and the others listen to him or her. And well, then phase 2 is that the group, the participants, ask questions. So they try to come up with questions which really help the case provider to think about his case question, about what he wants to learn. And this phase takes 30 to 45 minutes. Every participant has some questions and asks them to the case provider. Then phase 3 is that, so we are 1 hour ahead, and we are 1 hour in the Intervision, and now the facilitator asks the case provider, what are your insights? Can you list them? What is new for you? What's a new thought? What's a new perspective for you? Sometimes a case provider says, well, it's very helpful for me because I didn't think of it until now that way. So that's a good insight. So I start to look different at my case, and how I look differently is one ABCD. Then, after listing the insights, we asked him, what do you want to do with this insight? Because an insight is very vulnerable, very important. But if you don't do anything with it, well, it's just an insight. So what are you going to do? And a case provider has to have some time to think about it and to come up with actions. The participants can ask him questions about this all the time to make him think about actions or experiments or, well, let's try this or anything. So he learned to look differently, and he decides what to do with it. And the last phase is number 5, and that's an important phase as well, because here are the participants. The facilitator asked the participants, okay, it was the case of the case provider, but what is your insight? What do you learn from this case for yourself? And always people learn from another person's case as well. And the facilitator asks, what do you want to do with it? So that takes some time as well. So this whole process takes 2 hours. And then, well, they can end with, what do we think of it? Do we have to make changes? Because the facilitator guards, but he's not responsible. So if anyone says, well, I don't like this part of the discussion, well, we can see if we do it differently. So, and the next time they come together, another participant has a case, and the same process starts. Then about asking questions, because I told you that's very important, especially asking helpful questions. I have here some examples of helpful questions. You see that they are open-ended, because the ended questions, well, sometimes they are helpful too, but they don't contribute a lot in starting to think. And here, like an example, for example, the question, what does this mean to you, is a question which I use often, because we think we understand each other, but perhaps the meaning of something is far more different for you than for me. So I always ask, what do you mean? What does this mean to you? Or what do you mean with da da da? So these are some examples, and they are not easy to come up for the participants. So they have to have some time to think of good questions. There are some conditions. These are the 4 most important ones, which I already told you. This is for the facilitator very important to keep an eye on. Is it safe and confidential here in this group? Is there an openness, or isn't it there, and why is it? Are people asking in an easy way open questions, helpful questions, or are they a bit hesitating? Is there respect for each other? Well, it's, of course, when you read this, you say, well, of course, but it's very important to safeguard these things. And if you have a problem or a question, you have to bring it in the group and discuss it. If there's no safety, if there are no openness, if there are no helpful questions, if there's no respect, then intervision is not really possible, I think. So I hope you have a slight idea about what intervision is. I tell you a lot about intervision. Actually, we better do it here with in a group. It can be online as well, but well, for now it's this. And what are the results for the management consultants in the Netherlands? Well, of course they gain new insight as well. Because I know this because I did some research in the Netherlands, and I wrote an article in your management consulting journal of your Institute of Consulting. You can find it. The title is The Added Value of Intervision. You can read more about it, but their results are that they have new insights in their own role, and also they think of new ways of behaving, of their action. And you see in the sentences below that where it's about. They have new insights in their position as a consultant. That can be within the organization of the client, it can be in the organization of the management consultancy firm, or the system in which you act. What is my position here? Or what are the effects of my approach? I have some doubts about it. So, or they are about awareness of self-awareness, about me as a consultant. What drives me as a consultant? We choose this consultancy, and I suppose you have a passion to be a consultant, but what really drives me, or what drives me in this assignment, or what drives me in this project? Or what are the underlying motives under my behavior? It's not always easy to know. So Intervision and getting questions helps them to gain this insight. And they say, all of them say, well, it's for me, it's optimal learning. I learned so much in these 2 hours about my role or about my approach, and it only takes 2 hours. So you can read 1,000 books, but sometimes this question or questions which had an impact on your work, on your case, well, they really matter. And in the beginning, I told you, if you are a bit more experienced, you can use it with your Intervision, with your clients. You can be a facilitator, and you can have a group of a team or a project team or whatever, management team within the client organization. And I ask them the same. They say, well, in the end, Intervision contributes to becoming more successful, work together better. One of the things they mentioned a lot was that giving feedback as a second nature, giving feedback in a more natural way, was not so difficult anymore. So it helps to improve the organization. Well, you can read it. I know these are a bit fake bullets, but well, that's what they said. So, and that's what we want to do. You must realize that the case of the participants of the client's organization are discussed, so they know what they get from it and how it works for them. But if I want to give it back to you, then I have to use these terms. So I use it a lot in organizational change, in conflicts, in mergers, etc. I look at the time, and I have two small, well, let's call it exercises for you about the case and the case question, because I told you the case question is the most important, because the case provider, in the case question, the case provider tells us what he wants to learn, where we want to focus our questions. And often I get a case which is written down. It ends with a case question, and well, it's not always the right question. So let's take 2 examples. For example, the first one is of a CEO in one of the CEO groups I have. He had a difference of opinion between the board. One moment, I take water. So here there's a difference, thank you, a difference of opinion between the board of directors and the supervisory board about innovation. And this difference has clashed. Both stick to their opinion. There's no movement towards each other. That's, in a few sentences, the case. And his case question was, what should I do in this existing conflict? Well, when you read it, you think, well, that's a good question. Can we use it? And there are 5 questions. If I receive a case and a case question, I always use these 5 questions to see if the case question is, 1, is it personal enough? Is it a question for exploration, or is it far more simple, or is it recent or soon? Is it to improve himself? And is it not about asking advice? So with that questions in my mind, I look at this case question and I'm asking you to do the same. What should I do in this existing conflict? What do you think? I give you some little bit of time to think about it. What do you think of this case question? Is it personal enough? Is it recent or soon? Is it about asking advice? What do you think? Well, I was thinking too. And this case question, what should I do in this existing conflict? Well, it's not a bad question, but actually he asks for advice. What should I do? And asking advice is so-so, because you get an advice and, well, then you have an advice. Well, that's not about, then there's not enough thinking to do. So asking advice is not part of Intervision. So I talked to him and I said, can you reformulate your case question? And perhaps you thought of a possibility, and he came up with how can I act in this conflict with more effect. So that's more about him. It's not, you can say, well, it's asked a question for an advice as well, but he really wants to know what are my actions in this conflict, and what do I think what has more effect, instead of asking to the participants. But perhaps you have formulated an alternative, which can be right as well. But he came up with this one, and this one is better than the first one. The second example is from a project manager, and the case is that he has a deadline which is not met in a project. Every project member works for themselves and is not really focused on the other. And the project manager works very hard to save the project, but he can't succeed alone. So his question was, why don't the team members help me? Well, that's a good question. Why don't they do that? But is it a case question? Is it what he wants to learn? Is it about exploration? Oh, I will give you the 5 questions. Is it about exploration? Is it to improve himself? Is it about asking advices? Well, if you look at it, as I did when I received this case, I had contact with him and I asked him, well, how does this question, why don't the team members help me? How does this question encourage you to take some actions if you expect actions from others? Well, of course, that's not what he meant, but here it's important to formulate the question exactly. What do you want this intervision? What do you want to learn from it? And he came up with, after we talked about it, he came up with what keeps me from asking for help, because that's what he did do. So that's by far another question than the first one. Sometimes you have to have contact with the case provider and ask him, as a facilitator, and ask him some questions and see if he can formulate it in a different way. Well, here are 2 examples in which they did. And well, sometimes, but not always, of course, they want to keep the original question. And then I keep this question and see if it needs some change during the intervision. Well, that's about the case question. Perhaps you understand a bit what the power is from questions and how we use it in intervision. Not only with the case question, but also with the questions, the helpful questions, which are asked by the participants. So I'm coming at the end of this presentation, and well, because I don't know if Intervision is familiar in the UK, I will tell you how we, as Management Consultancy Institute, how we work with Intervision. So we do that more than 40 years already. So that's really long time, and it's still popular. So we have a community of certified management consultants who every year practice Intervision and reflect on their profession. But also many management consultancy firms organize their own intervision in the house. Science institutes organize it in-house. People use it a lot. And we as management consultants, for us in our community, Intervision is the most important. We also have a form of a form of coaching, but Intervision, people think it is as very helpful for them, and to develop in their profession. And that's why we have trainings to deliver experienced facilitators. We develop and train the new Intervision methods. And well, the last is important as well, because of COVID, there was a large question. There were a lot of questions about online possibilities. So we did Intervision online, and that was helpful too. Real life is better. but online was it gave us the opportunity to meet each other and to discuss professional issues as well during this COVID period. And now Holland, the Netherlands are very small, so we meet each other. But if you have a large firm or an international firm, it's also possible to do it online. Well, I think that's the end, Michael. I think you are there. Yeah.
I am here indeed. Thank you so much, Monique, for that excellent presentation, the insights, the explanations. It was very, very informative. So thank you. We are going to just take a look at some questions that we've received.
Yeah.
So we'll go through those and just share those, and you can give your insights and also pick up any questions that have come in from our live audience. So the first question to you, Monique: asking questions is not difficult, but asking helpful questions is. How can we improve that quality?
Well, I think that's the most difficult part of Intervision, because if anyone has a problem, we want to help. So first is we like to give advice, but the facilitator stops that. He says, ask questions, ask helpful questions. And helpful questions, well, the person who can decide if a question is helpful is the case provider. So we have, I use a lot of times, if a question is asked, I ask the case provider, is that a helpful question for you? And the case provider is very loyal and nice. So he said, well, every question helps me. Yeah, but does it make you think? Well. So it's very difficult to say no. But we make this agreement so that it's not a problem if you say no. We come up with new questions. So I ask him, is this a helpful question? And then he said, well, I'm sorry, no, it's not helpful. Then we don't spend time on that question, but we try to formulate a new question and see if that's helpful. So because we want to have questions which encourage the case provider to think and not ask questions of which he feels obliged to answer.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you get a question of where you know the answer already, so that doesn't make you think. And then he says, well, I know the answer, but I will tell you, no, as a facilitator, said, no, we only ask helpful questions. So that's a bit strange, but after 10 minutes, people are used to it. And then you see that the case provider comes to the heart of the problem of the case very quickly, instead of spending time to questions which are not so helpful. So I think it's not strange to ask, does this question help you? And if it's yes, please answer. If it's no, we're looking for another question. That's how I do it often. But that's, we're not used to that. So people have to get used to it. Yeah, I think that's the way.
Excellent. That's a great answer. Thank you so much, Monique. And our next question is, why is giving advice not wanted at Intervision? I find getting advice is always very helpful.
Yeah, that is correct. I find getting advice always very helpful as well. But if you get an advice, I'm very grateful to get the advice, but then you don't have to do Intervision. You can get some advice here and there. Why is it not wanted? Because if you get an advice, you start thinking about this advice. Is it something for me? Can I use this advice? how can I use this advice, etc. So you're only thinking in a small range surrounding the advice, but you're not thinking in a wide way. I hope I explain myself correctly if you understand it, but it's you only can think of, is this advice something for me? But the intervision is, and that's more passive. Huh? So you think, well, is it? I get the advice. Is it something for me? But if you get a question, your thinking is far more larger, and then you have to be more active, because you say, well, yes, a question makes me think, so it's and then this thinking starts aloud, you know. So, well, that's a bit strange, because advices are always interesting, but it starts thinking in a small way, and when a question, it's larger. Then you are more freely, you start brainstorming with answers, and there are more possibilities than only this advice. Perhaps you, in most of the situation, the case provider formulates his own advice. What I'm going to do, yes, what I'm going to do is because da 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 da, and that's far. And when you formulate that, you're doing it already. Is this, do I make myself understandable?
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure our audience would say the same. Thank you, Monique. And the next question, in fact, what I will do at this point is go to one of our live questions we've just received, and we'll come back to the other pre-submitted questions. And this live question comes to us from Ava, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And the question is, how does Intervision differ from the risk or issue management in the common project management methodology? At which stage would you bring Intervision in?
Yeah, that's a good question, because that needs good thinking. You can't start just with Intervision, but for example, I'm not a project management methodology expert, so please forgive me, but I know what your question is. And I would bring Intervision in when you decided what is necessary in this project in case of risks or in case of success of the project. So you have meetings, and you formulate risks or other threats or whatever, and how to deal with that. Then you can do it in a general way, but with Intervision you make it more personal. You are with 8 persons, and you can discuss also a general case about risk, and things what we want to change, and then you can talk about how we are going, what personal challenges do we meet when we want to change that, and how do I deal with that. So then still one of them has the case, but the others in the Intervision group can also say, when the case is about a risk and how to deal with it as a project group, they can also formulate what is new for them and what they are going to do. So then you know from each other how you look at this risk or this issue, and more in a personal way, and what you can contribute personally for the group to deal with this risk. I think after we have some common ground of risks and ways to change. Not at the beginning. If we decided, well, let's face those risks, let's face how we can work with this risk, solve them, then you can start with an Intervision group to make it far more personal. What is your personal contribution in this project, in this risk? And then we know it from each other, and you can also formulate how we do it as a team or as a group or whatever. So
Excellent.
it's
Thank
in a
you.
later phase. Yep.
Great. Thank you, Monique. And another pre-submitted question is, what do you do if safety cannot be guaranteed?
Well, that's a bit of that's a difficult question, because first you have to know that it's not safe in your group. And how do you know that? Well, you can ask it at the end of the intervision. Do we feel safe enough? People are not willing to answer that question. Yeah, it's safe. But so as a facilitator, you have to look carefully. Are they open, or do you think they're holding back? Or but also, I experienced it once, that I get a phone call from one of the participants, and it was the case provider, and he said, "Well, I was in a meeting, and one of those people said, well, you had a case, so I heard it from whoever. So then it's too late. So the next day I called all the participants. So we had a meeting, and I said, well, there is no safety, there's no confidentiality anymore. So I will stop. I was in the role of facilitator. So I'll stop this meeting, because you cannot repair confidentiality, you cannot repair safety. But if I get a hunch, if I get an idea, then I would discuss it in the group. For me as facilitator, I noticed that I think it's not always safe enough, and it's very good if you mention it. Please tell me, and sometimes they do, but if it's not repairable, it cannot be guaranteed. Then you have to stop immediately, because there's no openness, there's no respect. So that happened once in my life. And that was very unpleasant, actually. Because what to do then with the group? Well, no, not Intervision, something else. So I did something else as a management consultant, but I didn't do Intervision anymore in this group. Yeah.
Excellent. Interesting. Thank you so much, Monique. And our final pre-submitted question is Intervision the same as peer consultation?
Well, the answer is no, because peer consultation is a little bit more like assessing, comparing each other to the norms and the guidelines of others in our professional field. And Intervision is more about discovering your own personal standards and your own values. So I mentioned the Intervision method code of ethics. So here we compare it, yes, but the goal is not to see if you are doing well of comparing to the ethics in our professional fields, but to see if where your ethics, your own professional standards differ from the code of ethics. So I think that's what I want to prevent, is that we are assessing ourselves and comparing ourselves to one another. Oh, you do it, oh, I do it that way. And well, what does it bring you? It's far more important to know what your own professional standards are in your work, and or in this assignment, or in this project, or in this problem, or in this case. That's far more important. So no, it's not the same.
Excellent. Great. Thank you, Monique. And we've come to the end of our live and pre-submitted questions and the presentation. So that just leaves me to say a big thank you to you, Monique, for sharing with us today and for sharing your insights and expertise, which has been most beneficial. And don't forget, for those of you who have tuned in, if you are a member of the Institute of Consulting, you can log into Consulting Direct using the link in the live chat, and you can find a wide range of exclusive and practical development resources and much more. And if you are not yet a member, you can join our community via the link that's also in the live chat to gain full access to our Consulting Direct portal. So thank you again for joining us. Do share your feedback with the evaluation as well to let us know how you enjoyed the event, and do enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, Monique, as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you
You're
for having
welcome.
me. Bye-bye.
Thank you.